Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast, where we like to enjoy our time afield. And I have been enjoying not only my time afield, but a publication called Sports Afield for most of my life. And today we are lucky to be joined by the current editor and really pretty long time editor of Sports Afield magazine, who has done a great job of keeping this publication viable in this day and age of Instagrams and YouTubes and such. It's kind of refreshing to see a good old-fashioned hunting and fishing magazine. Well, not so much fishing, pretty much all hunting these days. But Sports Afield is still around, and the editor is my good friend, Diana Rupp. Diana, welcome.
Thank you, Ron. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you, Diane. Diana has been editor for how long now?
I have been doing this, believe it or not, for 22 years. Started back in 2002.
Wow. Yeah, I knew it was quite a while, but I didn't realize it was that long. That's pretty cool.
Going on a quarter century now.
Yeah. Well, I'm just really tickled that Sports Afield is doing as well as it is. It's a great publication. For a while there, it looked like it was going to fade away like so many of them have. But you guys seem to have hit on the right recipe to remain viable. What exactly did you do?
Well, back in 2002, my publisher, Ludo Werfbane, who owned Safari Press, which is a book publishing company, he bought Sports Afield with the idea of resuscitating it. It had gone through, as you mentioned, some hard times, as many print publications did and have and are still. But he had a new vision for it at the time, and that was to make it a big game hunting magazine, mostly focused on big game. It had used to be more of a, general interest hunting and fishing magazine. His focus was big game, the traveling big game hunter, kind of the higher end of the hunting, segment, if you were. And so we focused on, the people who like to go to Africa, who travel to Alaska, who hunt big game in the West, and also on fine guns, fine firearms, high-end ammunition and gear, that sort of thing. And that seemed to really strike a chord. It was a little difficult in the beginning, kind of to get the message out as to what we were doing. That was probably the hardest part. But once people realized it, they really responded. And we've had just a great readership that is very loyal to the magazine and really seems to enjoy what we do. I mean, our focus is, the fun stuff, adventure, the passion that we all have for going places and exploring and hunting the coolest big game out there.
Yeah, and you've done a great job. I wondered when you were doing that, I thought at first, gosh, I don't know, this seems like a pretty narrow demographic that you're hitting, but I've certainly seen the success of it. And I understand instinctively the appeal, because it's the same with me. I get a Sports Afield, and I just happen to have one right here. For anyone who's watching this as well as listening on podcast, we've got a copy. And it does appeal to that deep sense of adventure that I think most of us hunters have. We're always dreaming about Jack London's Alaska and Hemingway and Rourke in Africa. And my gosh, we can actually still go there. And you cover it so well in your magazine, both with your readers who contribute, but also a bunch of old writers like me who've made a career of doing this sort of thing. So yeah, it's working out pretty well. Now, how far back did Sports Afield go? Because I remember in the 60s and 70s when I was young and really eating this stuff up. It is already a long-established magazine, one of what we call the big three. And I always thought it was more, I don't know, it really appealed to me because it felt like I could identify with sort of the blue-collar approach. It sort of covered everything and appealed to your rural hunters, which, of course, back in those days, the country was quite a bit more rural than it is now. Not many of us could afford to hop on a jet and go to an exotic location. So we depended on magazines like Sports Afield to get ourselves all amped up and provide us with good information on how to improve our local hunting and stuff. Do you remember when that magazine actually began publication?
Well, I'm happy to say I don't actually remember the time it started, because that was 1887. I'm not quite that old, getting there, but yeah. Um, so yeah, we are actually the oldest hunting magazine in the country and one of the oldest in the world.
Wow, that is cool.
It was started by a guy named Claude King in Denver, Colorado back in 1887 and published its first issue in January of 1888. Um, and I wish I had an image of the front cover. It looked totally different. You wouldn't think it was a magazine. It looked more like a newspaper back in those days.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
so, needless to say, throughout that period of time, it has gone through many, many changes in focus and everything else. But yes, as you said, in what I would consider the real heyday of outdoor magazines, which was probably the 50s and 60s and 70s, it was kind of the go-to magazine for, the general outdoors person. The deer hunter, the bass fisherman, the trout fisherman, and people did everything in those days. They weren't as
Yeah.
specialized as
Yeah.
they are now. Like when my dad was, growing up and stuff, he did everything seasonally. He fished for trout in the spring, he shot woodchucks in the summer, he hunted deer in the fall, he did a little bass fishing, did a little duck hunting, he did
Yeah.
it all. And that's what everybody did in those days. And what we discovered, and one of the reasons that you mentioned that, our current, focus is narrow, and it's purposely so, because what we discovered was that as the world has changed and, things have changed, the world has gotten more urban, people have less time than they used to. So they've they've narrowed their focus, and you've probably seen that in the people who listen to your podcast, et cetera. That people tend to be, I'm an archery hunter, or I'm a big game hunter, or I'm a bird hunter, and that's what I
Hmm.
do, or I'm a fisherman. There aren't as many general outdoors types as there used to be. So most of the magazines following that trend have gone to more of a niche sort of approach. So, for example, you've got your Peterson's Bow Hunting magazine. You've got your Fly Fisherman. You've got various magazines that are very narrowly focused on a particular demographic because that's what people seem to want these days.
Yeah, that makes sense now that you explained it that way. And I think it's because we don't live in an area or rural enough that we can take advantage of all those seasonal things. We sort of have to pick one and make it our specialty. It's a lot more challenging when you have to plan a week-long trip to go pheasant hunting or deer hunting or off to Africa. It's not like you can come home from work and there's still 2 hours of light left. You can step out the back door and roust up some pheasants or cottontails or even a deer. So that makes sense why it's changed.
I think you hit the nail on the head.
Well,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as I was mentioning my dad, he grew up in a place you could do all those things out his back
yeah,
door,
yeah, absolutely.
and where I live, it's,
Can't do it anymore. Huh?
it's a much bigger deal to go out and do anything.
Yeah, but you did it when you were a child under the tutelage of your father, didn't you?
I did, and father and mother
Your mom
too.
did,
So
huh?
I was a super fortunate child.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in the country in northern Pennsylvania. Both my dad and my mom were big hunters and very serious outdoorsmen. We just lived and breathed the
Oh,
outdoors.
cool.
And I started following my parents into the woods when I was about 8. They started letting me tag along, I guess, because around that time I could be quiet enough for a couple hours, maybe not scare anything off. And I remember, seeing my dad shoot a deer, and I was so excited and held the leg as he gutted it, and everything. And it was just, I could not wait to start myself. And in those days, Pennsylvania, you had to be 12, So, I was counting down the days till I turned 12 years old and I could go deer hunting. I was so excited.
I'll bet. So when you did finally go, did you get your deer right away?
Of course not. Nope. Nope. It turned out to be pretty difficult as I discovered. It didn't seem hard for dad and mom at all. They were really good at it. So I figured I would just waltz out there and get a deer first time. Yep. It took me 2 years. So yeah, I got my first deer when I was
Oh, that's
14.
not bad.
But it was worth the wait. I learned an awful lot in those 2 years. And I still look back on those days with just great
Yeah.
fondness. So it was a wonderful way to grow up, and it's unfortunate that not as many kids have that experience, these
Yeah.
days in terms of growing up in a rural area and just, being just eaten up with hunting as I was at the
Yeah.
time. Still am.
Yeah, well, and you're still at it. I mean, I've seen some of your articles in the magazine, and you've been off to exotic places, including how high in elevation were you on that? Was it a Marco Polo sheep hunt that you went on recently?
I haven't hunted Marco Polo yet. That is definitely on the bucket list. I have done mid-Asian
Oh, that
ibex
was the
in
one.
that same area, like in Central Asia. Yeah, and so yeah, I made it up to 16,000 feet on that hunt. I tell you, the air is thin up there. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it was a wonderful adventure. Yeah, and as my dad once said to me, he said, I never imagined. He said, I was always glad you enjoyed hunting, but I never imagined you would take it to this extreme. So, and I have been extremely fortunate as basically just a Pennsylvania deer hunter to be able to do so many of the adventures that I have had the opportunity to do through the
Well,
magazine.
your dad shouldn't have been surprised because he named you Diana after what's a Roman goddess of the hunt or something like that?
That is true.
Yeah.
Yep, he did, and I think he knew kind of what he was doing.
That's good planning on his part. Now, Diana, because you are so close to the worldwide hunter, big game especially, you're probably noticing the trends, not only in what we've been discussing and who goes what and what sort of interests they have, but the gear, the equipment. That seems to be a big focus these days of hunters. They really get tuned on to the what rifle are you using, which cartridge, which bullet are you shooting, optics, scopes, rangefinders. It's just gotten so complicated. We used to go to the woods with a simple lever action in our hands and a pocket full of shells, and that was about it. And what sort of trends are you seeing right now in selection of gear?
Well, so as I said, I'm kind of coming at it from the higher end of the demographic from what my readers are interested in. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I see, what they write in and what they seem to be interested in. Interestingly, my readership does not seem to be as into the crazy long range, fancy, um, you know, serious, huge scopes, that kind of thing, as a lot of the trends seem to be going. My Our readership seems to like a lot of traditional stuff, a lot of wooden stocks,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, lighter rifles because there's a lot of mountain hunters among our readership, and it's interesting to me because every time we run a story on some of the longer range hunting or which we try to avoid a little bit because we all kind of tend to think the same way that hunting is about stalking and getting close and so forth. But I mean, there's no doubt that the long range is the big trend in hunting today, and I'm actually kind of heartened that our readership prefers to do it a little bit more the traditional
Mm-hmm.
way. And I really like seeing that.
Yeah. So you're sort of appealing to the walnut and blued set, shall we say?
I mean, not entirely. Obviously, our readers do really like, modern rifles as well. But I would say that they do tend to kind of skew toward the walnut and blue. We have a custom rifles column in the magazine that gets a ton of readership. Stephen Dodd Hughes does a really good job with that. And, those are rifles that are one of a kind, very costly, beautiful walnut, etc. And people seem to love them.
Yeah.
Obviously, not everybody can afford rifles like that, but I think I like to think that we're in the business of entertainment and inspiration, and we like to inspire people to dream big and say, "Boy, I could have a rifle like that," and I mean, I could go on a hunt like this. And even if they maybe can't do it right now, they put it on their list of goals that they can do it in 10
Mm-hmm.
years, and I love to hear it when people come up to me at some of the hunting conventions and say, I never thought about going to Africa, but then I was reading some of your stories and I thought, man, I have to do that. And so I've booked my first African safari and I'm going in 2 years. And that's just a tremendous thrill for me to see people, realizing dreams that they never thought they could realize.
Yeah, that is a big part of what you do, and I think it probably is what magazines like Sports Afield always have done. There's the practical side of it, the instructional side of it, which is highly valuable, but it's that stimulation, new ideas for where to go. And when you read and see pictures of someone else who's done it, and you realize these are ordinary Americans just like me, if they can do it, why can't I? And then you do set that bucket list goal, and you begin to direct yourself toward it. And I have a lot of listeners and viewers of my podcast as well who dearly love walnut and blued and expensive rifles and all, but can't necessarily afford those. And they take a nice pragmatic approach to it. I've got my deer rifle. I understand enough about ballistics and performance and things that I know if I use, let's say, in my good old 270 Winchester, if I use a controlled expansion 150 grain bullet, I really don't need to buy a 375 H&H Magnum for $8,000 in order to go to Africa and have a successful hunt and a great time. Or 300 Magnum of some kind to go to Alaska. 30-06 will more than do the job for you. So they will put their savings toward the trip rather than a lot of fancy equipment. But then there's the other side where, and I think it's usually younger guys, I may be off on that, somebody out there can correct me, but it seems like a lot of the younger guys get so excited about equipment, gear, then they're gearheads, I call them, and they just want to get the latest and greatest of everything. And I even see this in the bow hunting world. It's like bows are nowadays like cars. The basic bow is there, but there's a new fender on it every year. And somebody's got to buy the new one. I've got a buddy who's been shooting the same old compound bow since I think the first wheeled bow was invented, and he gets his deer every year. But then there are other guys who've got to have this year's model of whatever bow it is they're shooting. And it's a similar thing with rifles and different cartridges. Are you noticing a trend, even if your more conservative readers probably aren't into the extreme range target shooting sort of thing? Do you notice if they are becoming more interested in these longer range cartridges, the modern versions of, say, the 7 Rem Mag is now the 7 PRC, and the old 6.5x55 became the 6.5 Creedmoor, and on it goes. Is there considerable interest in that?
Oh, there's most definitely considerable interest. Yeah. I think hunters of all stripes have a gearhead streak in them, and there are, as you said, it tends to be more of the younger readers who are really into the brand new stuff, the PRCs, et cetera. But everybody's interested in them, if for no other reason to read all about it and learn and say, oh, I know all about this PRC now, and darn it, my 7 Rem Mag is just as good, or whatever, So there's a tremendous interest by all, I think all serious hunters. Let's face it, everybody is always looking for the best tool for the job. And even though, I'm a fan of one of our old time writers, Colonel Townsend Whelan, who said the 30-06 is never a mistake. And I totally agree with that. But at the same time, tell me more about the 6.5 PRC and all these, what can it do, really? So I got to try that. And I think our readers definitely feel that. So, yeah. Oh, so big. Yeah, absolutely. Coverage of new cartridges and gear it's a big part of the magazine. So we try to balance it a little bit with, the new stuff with the old, the new gear with, stories of, walnut and blue. So, you can do both.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's what really appeals to people.
Yeah, I always enjoy one of your writers, John Barsness. We're the same age. I've known him for a long, long time, and he does a wonderful job of explaining the old traditional cartridges and rifles and bullets and trajectories and stuff, but still is up to date on the new things and does a nice job of comparing them so that readers get a good handle on what they might gain from a new one versus what they might give up from the old one. That's the kind of thing that makes your magazine quite viable, I think. Really helps you hang in there. Do you find that the interest in your publication is waning slightly just because of the demographic and the increase in all the YouTube stuff? Is it taking away, or has that sort of tapered down and come into a nice level balance?
I'd like to say it's tapered, but I don't think it's specifically Sports Afield. I think that there's just the change in the way people consume information in the last 20 years, even 10 years, is just tremendous. And that has, really been rough on print publications of all types,
Mm-hmm.
not just ours. And that's why you've seen so many of them go to online only formats, et cetera. So there's absolutely no doubt that it used to be if you wanted to learn about the latest and greatest new cartridge or rifle or whatever, you would buy Sports Afield or one of the other big outdoor magazines. But now you'll probably go straight to YouTube. Let's face it, because that's you're going to get the information there. And yeah, it's been a huge change, and it's very impactful for print publications of all stripes, and
Mm-hmm.
we've certainly felt it.
Mm-hmm.
I still believe strongly, and fortunately, my publisher does as well, that there's a major place still for print publications, and that people really still enjoy them and can get a lot out of them. And there's a certain, I don't know, you don't know necessarily what you're getting on YouTube. Hopefully people know to go to, say, Ron Spomer Outdoors and get the real deal from somebody who knows what they're talking about. But if you just Google something, who knows what you'll get.
Yeah, yeah.
But people still do know that they can buy Sports Afield and they can trust the information that's in the magazine. So we have that going
Yeah,
for us for sure.
yeah.
Um, but younger people, they're much more into YouTube. They don't buy print publications necessarily, or they buy them occasionally.
Yeah.
So that's one of our biggest challenges going forward for sure.
Yeah, I suppose it's somewhat analogous to the town crier losing his job when print came in. Say, Diana,
Okay.
did you try anything different in your publication to work against that trend for folks going to the Instagram, YouTube, online information, to keep your readership? To me, I think the attraction of a magazine like Sports Afield is its format doesn't require electricity, for one thing. You could go to a hunting camp and in the outhouse there's a magazine. You're not going to find that necessarily a computer screen there. And 20, 40 years from now, I can pull out magazines from back in the 60s and reread them and go, wow, this is really cool. Look at those ads. Look at the clothing people were wearing. And it's more of a permanent object. But of course, if you're 18, 25-year-old and you're getting into the excitement of the hunting and all the rest of it, you probably don't realize that or think that way. But in trying to address the potential readership, have you tried anything that's a little bit new or different in the publishing world that might not have been around in the 60s, 70s, and 80s?
Well, I'm not sure it's really new or different. Obviously, marketing the magazine to that new demographic is a challenge, and you have to go at them where they're going, which is essentially online. So we do maintain a very, what I think is a really good website. You can find a lot of our articles on there. You can see a lot. It's easy to subscribe. We do a lot of in-person meet and greet type marketing, which I think has been extremely effective for us by going to the hunting
Mm-hmm.
conventions and just putting the magazine in people's hands. That really, I think the magazine itself is our best sales tool,
Mm-hmm.
because once people flip through it, they say, "Boy, this is a lot nicer actually than going to, just clicking on a link or whatever."
Yeah.
Um, and it's just a matter, I think, of getting it into people's hands and then having them realize that what an enjoyable thing it is, like you said, to be able to pick up that physical copy.
Yeah, yeah, the
Um,
hands-on.
and it's just something I think that, the younger people aren't used to doing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you've done a great job with it, and I hope you continue. Now, you're also really still active in hunting. You're sort of traveling the world as much as you can, I imagine. That ibex hunt was one example, and I think it was just what last year or the year before you got the coveted bighorn ram tag in Colorado. Is that right?
I drew bighorn tag, yes, last year in 2023 in Colorado. I absolutely could not believe it. I'd been putting in for 14 years. Even before I moved to Colorado, I was putting in for bighorn tag, and it was truly my dream hunt. That is the thing I wanted to hunt more than anything else. And it's you can't. I mean, you can buy those tags, I guess, if you buy an auction tag and you have
Yeah.
many hundreds of thousands of dollars. But essentially, you can't buy that tag. You have to draw it, and it was such a thrill. Yeah, and it was a great hunt. I really had an amazing time.
What rifle?
It was a lot of pressure,
Pressure?
because you draw that tag and holy cow, I'm never going to draw a tag like this again. I have to fill it. So that was an interesting part of it that I had not really foreseen, but I really really enjoyed the hunt.
You,
And so now I have 3 sheep, and yeah, so I only have the desert bighorn left of the Grand Slam.
wow. And if you get a desert bighorn, shoot one for me too, because that's all I need. Talk about an expensive and hard to
Although
draw tag.
you might have something to say about yeah.
Yeah, we'll split them. I'll take the
Yeah,
back
that's a
half.
really tough. It sounds good. Wait, that's the good eating part. You can't eat
Well, all
horns.
right. If you want me to have the horns,
That
I
was one of
suppose.
the things that surprised me. That was actually one of the things that surprised me most about the the bighorn is how absolutely delicious that meat
Yeah.
is. It is so
Yeah,
tasty.
it really is.
I love we eat wild game pretty much all the time, and I eat elk and deer and so forth. But bighorn sheep was tremendous. It's pretty much gone, unfortunately. So yeah, time to draw another
Yeah,
tag.
just draw another tag. Piece of cake.
Nothing like it.
So you've got your bighorn ram, and I assume, did I hear you say this is a third one? So you've got a stone and a doll already?
I do.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. I got those 2 sheep about 15 years ago,
Wow, nice.
and that was yeah that it was very eye opening going on this most recent sheep hunt because I was 15 years younger when I did those other two, and it makes a big difference,
Yeah.
a huge
Have
difference.
you noticed that gravity's gotten stronger in the last 15 years?
The mountains have gotten steeper, gravity's gotten stronger. I don't know what's going on.
Well, I know what's going on. Grandpa Ron's gotten older. That's what's going on. I don't know about you. Oh, wow.
Uh,
Hey, what sort of rifle did you use and ammunition and all? What was talking to gearheads here? What does the gearhead use on a sheep hunt in Colorado?
well, so I had actually a little trouble with my rifle as I was getting ready for the hunt. I had been planning to use a 280 mountain rifle that we have, which seemed like the ideal rifle. But it developed some feeding problems right about a month before I left, and I couldn't get it to group well, and I was kind of in a panic, to be honest. And we have several rifles, but I wanted something that was obviously lightweight and that I could utterly depend on. And at that point, I looked around at what I had and I said, I have this Ruger American that I use for my elk hunts. And, the gearheads will just shake their heads and go, well, that's a very inexpensive rifle. Don't you need a real nice long range expensive rifle for a big sheep hunt? Actually, no, you really don't. This rifle, I mean, it is a tack driver. Always has been. It's totally dependable. So it needed a really good optic. So I put a Swarovski scope on it, and had the turrets and whatnot. And I experimented with a few loads, and I found a Barnes. I absolutely love the Barnes triple shock, and 163 grain, and man, it just was an absolute tack driver with that load. So I said, oh, this is what I'm taking. I'm not going to mess around with it anymore. And I spent a good 3 weeks going out every day to the range and shooting that rig at 300 yards and making sure I was really dialed in and shooting, real field positions and so forth, which is key. I think a lot of people don't practice that way. And yeah, and one shot, 260 yards, and that
Nice.
rifle did it. So
What was
yeah,
what was
it's
the chambering
kind of
again?
an odd 30-06.
It was a 30-06.
Good old Townsend Wheeling.
How you there you go. You proved yourself. See, what I've noticed lately, Diana, is that you don't hear as much about the 30-06,
Never
and
a
I
mistake.
find it difficult to find rifles chambered for it anymore. Are you seeing that at all? You go to the store and you're going to see all the 7 PRCs and the 6.5 Creedmoors and all
Yes.
the rest of them, and there are very few 30-06 on the shelves anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think most rifle manufacturers are still chambering it, but yeah, it's definitely starting to fall out of favor because it's seems like an antique, I guess, to the new rifle buyer. But
Yeah.
again, it's never a mistake. It can do it all, and you look at the ballistics and of all these rifles, and yes, once you start reaching out, there are many other calibers that would be better, but I had no intention of shooting a sheep at 500 yards or whatever. I plan to do this as a real hunt and get within 300 yards if I possibly could, which I was able
Hmm.
to, thanks to a really good guide. And yeah, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with the /06, and you can shoot a little bit of a heavier bullet with it, which is really nice. And a Rocky Mountain Bighorn is actually a big, blocky animal, and they're tough. They're really tough. My sheep, he was hit pretty much perfectly, but he still ran about 40, 50 yards straight up the mountain, full speed ahead after I shot him. He just didn't know he was dead, and then he
Yeah.
dropped. But yeah, I mean, it's really there's a reason it's been around for as long as it has. It's a great round.
Yeah.
I mean, and the other thing is, it's with all these rounds, it's really just ballistics. I mean, you can shoot long range with a 30-06 if you know the drop, and especially with today's scopes and whatnot with turrets and being able to dial into your range, really just a matter of knowing your rifle. I think that's more important than what rifle it is or what cartridge it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to tweak my viewers on my podcasts and my regular channel on YouTube. And I decided to do one on the 30-06, being a declining cartridge in its declining years, shall we say. So, of course, I titled it, You've Got to Catch Their Attention with that thumbnail. So I titled it something like, Is the 30-06 Going Obsolete? And oh my gosh, did I catch a raft of it from that. I definitely found out how many 30-06 lovers are out there because I was inundated by nasty comments about my stupidity for suggesting such a thing. But the reason I did it was because I hear so much about the 308 from viewers. They're always love with that 308. And I punch them in the nose now and then too by saying something nasty about their beloved 308, which is a great cartridge, obviously. But boy, you can get the 308 and the 30-06 guys going at each other too. It's just funny how they're just one or the other, and you're an idiot if you choose the wrong one. So it was really fun to just see what sort of a response I got. And there were a few of the younger guys who said, You're right, Ron. The 30-06 is dead in the water. It's an old geezer's cartridge. It doesn't even belong on the planet anymore. But I think we're going to see it for another century at least. There's just so many rifles out there already chambered for it. But I have noticed that it just gets harder and harder to find new ones on the shelf. I just think it's I guess the younger kids who don't have a rifle yet are thinking, I want the latest and greatest, and they don't fully understand an old rifle. And probably half the reason is just because grandpa or dad had it, so you've got to get something different from what dad had if you want to be cool.
And to your point about the 308, and it's really surged recently, and I don't know if it's the more efficient cartridges and so forth that we have, but that I've really noticed that. And in fact, I have a young friend that I've been mentoring, and she's gotten really into hunting, and she wanted to buy a rifle. And she was, going through the various calibers, and we settled on the
Hmm.
308. And it's an ideal caliber for her. And I'm more of a 30-06 person on that side. But, looking at what she wanted and the short action and all the advantages of the 308, I said, you're going to be able to hunt elk with us. You're going to be hunting deer, antelope, anything basically you want to hunt in Colorado and Wyoming and around where we live. Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
cartridge. And she's been super happy with it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Yep. Have you got any exciting hunts planned for this fall?
Actually, I don't have any super exciting hunts planned for this fly, but I am excited about the hunts I have planned, which are most importantly going back to Pennsylvania to hunt with the
Hmm.
family. My husband's family, he's got a nephew who's really getting into hunting, his brother and his dad, and so they've got a hunting camp that we're all going to go back and look for some whitetails. And that's a way I grew up hunting, and I'm really excited to go back and do it. I only do it every few years, and it's always an absolute treat to go back there.
Yeah.
It's not easy hunting, not as many deer as there used to be when I was growing up there, but it's always a challenge, and it's just beautiful woods. I really, really enjoying that. And I've also gotten to be more of a meat hunter these days. I really just love venison, and we eat wild game more than anything else. Basically, I don't know when I bought any beef last, so that hopefully fill the freezer. And I've got another whitetail hunt actually in Missouri this year, that going on a one where they want us to kill a few does, and again trying to fill the
Yeah.
freezer. So yeah, so it'll be low key, but I'm really looking forward
Hey.
to it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for going back to your roots, and also low key. I know it'll sound kind of funny to people who haven't done a lot of long distance hunts, flying up to Alaska or Canada or even off to Africa or Argentina or something, to hear somebody like you and me say, "Boy, I'd really like to just go back home and do a whitetail hunt." But I think it's because it takes us back to those first hunts when we were so young and enthusiastic, and it brings back all those memories. And I think that's a huge part of what makes hunting such an enduring pastime for us. It's those connections to family, to tradition, and even going back to many hunters who came before us who we're not related to, but people like Theodore Roosevelt and the early conservationists who kept things going for us and made it possible for us to still have this wildlife. We owe them a significant debt of gratitude, and we need to fill their boots now and continue what they started. So I think a simple whitetail hunt back in the old home country is a great way to spend your fall.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And it's good to remind yourself that DIY hunts are really good for you too. And I love guided hunts. Love being able to see new country. But it's also tremendously challenging, to have to do it yourself, figure out where those deer are, and go after them. So I love that. I love that challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, are you at the stage in life now where you accept the challenge and enjoy the heck out of it, and you don't get a deer and you're just as happy as if you had?
Well, just as happy.
Just as happy?
Maybe not quite just as happy, but yes.
Honestly, that's good honesty.
Yeah. I, I can't, I can't say that I would be just as happy, but yes, I'm always very happy to get out. As a matter of fact, and you may have seen this in the latest issue of Sports Afield, but I wrote my latest editor's notes on that very topic. That you know it seems like when you read magazines and you watch videos and so forth, that everybody who goes out, they get something every time,
Yeah.
and that's just not how it works. And it's good. I think it's good to remind yourself and others that it's not always supposed to be a success. You're supposed to get out there and work for it, and so as the old trope is, that's why they call it hunting, not
Yeah.
shooting. So
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
important.
Yeah, and if you can learn, and I think it is a learning process, you have to sort of tell yourself, I am going to appreciate the small things, my efforts, using my knife, making a fire, any of the things that one does while hunting that at first might seem ancillary to the shooting the animal. But over the years, you begin to appreciate how that stuff adds up and adds such a richness to your life in the field as a hunter, as an outdoorsman. So I'm definitely at that stage. I still don't fully appreciate a hunt in which I'm unsuccessful as when I am, but I'm a lot closer.
Exactly, exactly. I think that's all we can work towards. But
Yeah.
yeah, but no, that's a good point about the experience of it. And that's another thing that I'm really trying to focus on in the magazine is the experience of the hunt is so important, not just the
Hmm.
kill. And and I think it's very important for us as hunters going forward to help the non-hunting public understand that aspect of it because so many times all they see is us posing with an animal,
Yeah.
but it was all the things that went into that hunt, the hike up the mountain, the sunsets and sunrises, and the using your gear and making that fire and all those things. That's what makes it so rewarding.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important to, and that's something that we hunters have not done a real good job of getting that side of it out to the non-hunting public. And it's become one of my things that I really want to focus on going forward is I think outreach to non-hunters and helping them understand, you know, all the things that go into a hunt. It's not just bringing home the meat. That's an important part of it, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, that is a difficult thing to articulate. And I think a big part of the reason is that so much of it is internal. When you say, I'm going to go on my first elk hunt next year, you are already on that hunt when you start thinking about it. It might be 10 months
Yeah.
down the road, but you're dreaming of it. You're starting to buy the necessary boots and packs, and that whole process is the hunt. But how do you write about it? I don't think I could sell you an article on, I'm so excited about my upcoming elk hunt. You kind of want a story about the hunt and maybe a picture of an elk in there somewhere. But I hear you, and that is an extreme challenge. If I ever come up with any ideas that work, I'll be sure to let you know. But you do the same for me, will you?
A story about
There you
anticipation.
go. Make
Yes.
you brought to you by a ketchup manufacturer.
Right, right.
Oh, wow. Well, listen, Diana, I want to thank you for helping out because I think podcasts like this, folks listen to, and especially women. There are so many female hunters these days that it's really not even worth mentioning that this is a woman who goes hunting because, come on, it's just standard stuff. But still, there are young girls out there who may not have a father like yours who takes you in the field or a mother like yours who takes you in the field like that. So it's a growing segment, and I think an important one. The hand that rocks the cradle, big role to play in all of this. So I think that just listening to you on this podcast is going to help a lot of folks realize that they can achieve their dreams in the hunting fields and aspire to the sorts of things that you have been able to do yourself. And that all helps. It all helps. So they'll start thinking about that anticipation, and maybe they can help articulate it. And maybe some of them can send you over the transom an article about their exciting hunt in which they didn't get anything, but it still makes for a great story. And I want to read it when you publish it.
Sounds great. Yeah. No, you make a good point there. I think probably the most rewarding aspect of my career is when I have people come up to me, at hunting shows or events or whatever, and say things like, you know, my wife never was interested in hunting, and then she read some of your articles, and she said, "Boy, I'd like to give this a try." Or other women come up to me and say,
Hmm.
you've really helped me want to get out there and made me realize that that there are lots of us out there who are doing this, and that's super rewarding to me. I think that's one of the best things that can come out of all this. So
Yeah. I noticed in your latest issue a new author I hadn't read, Kristen Alberts, it
yes,
says
yes,
here. I was just glancing at that article. I didn't read the whole thing, but I was reading a bit of it, and I thought, this is really well done. This person can write. And then I realized a woman hunter was on this trip, and she is
She
quite the
is. I
writer.
met her on a turkey hunt a couple years ago, and yeah, and just realized that she had a lot of talent, and so yeah, she's done a couple stories for us, and I'm really always on the lookout for women writers, but also for all good up and coming writers. Are always trying to
Uh-huh.
find new people and new voices, and I just love to give them a shot and have them share their stories. And I think that's with our readers.
Well, Diana, how does someone who's aspiring to that get a hold of you and get a shot at it? What do they have to do?
It's pretty easy. Just go to our website, sportsafield.com, and if you click on contact us, there are editorial guidelines, tells you all about how to go about submitting a story or a query or just getting a hold of me. Usually just email, and we have some guidelines on there that kind of shows you what we're looking for, that sort of thing. But I usually tell
Hmm.
people if they want to write a story, just write the story and send it to me over the transom, as they call it. And I'll take a look at it and I'll tell you yay or nay, and if it's not quite there, but might have some promise, I'll probably tell you that as well. So yeah, I mean, give it a shot. And I read everything that comes in, and I'm always really interested in hearing new voices. So really really
Well,
encourage people to do
great.
that for sure. Yeah.
All right, there you go, folks. You've heard from the expert, the editor for 20 plus years at Sports Afield magazine, Diana Rupp. She is the real deal. As you can tell, she's a hunter. She's not just faking it.
Pretty hard to fake it for
So,
22 years. So yeah.
yeah, that's a pretty good fake. I really appreciate you joining us and sharing some of your stories and giving us the good news on Sports Afield. I hope you guys continue to publish long into the future. It's the kind of magazine and publication that it's just fun to read now and in 10 years and in 40 years. It just stays around and got good value. So I urge everyone to check it out. You guys might want to read the magazine, if not write for it, but good luck with either one of those. Diana is a good egg to have on our side at Sports Afield, and we thank her for joining us on Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast. Diana, good luck on all your outdoor adventures this fall, and I will look forward to seeing you the next chance we can meet.
Thank you.
Until next time, everyone, thanks for joining me here, and thanks for having a good time with Diana and me going over some of our old hunts, as well as some outlooks for the future. And everybody, let's all remember to hunt honest and shoot straight.